There is a part of your brain that has been waiting for you to notice it, not in some abstract, poetic sense, but in a very real biological way. Networks of neurons are constantly rewiring themselves based on what you pay attention to, what you repeat, what you avoid, and what you believe is possible. This is not motivational language. This is how your nervous system operates at its core. And once you understand this, you begin to see that most people are living far below what their brain is actually capable of doing. Your brain is not fixed. It is not static. It is an adaptive organ that is constantly reshaping itself in response to your behavior. Every time you focus your attention, you are sending a signal through circuits that either strengthen or weaken based on repetition. That means your habits are not just things you do. They are things that physically sculpt your brain. The thoughts you rehearse, the fears you revisit, the goals you visualize, these are not passive experiences. They are instructions. There is a hidden power in that process. Because if your brain is always changing, then it means you are never locked into who you were yesterday. But here's where most people get it wrong. They assume change happens when motivation shows up. They wait for a feeling. They wait for energy, clarity, or confidence. But your brain doesn't change because you feel ready. It changes because you act in specific ways repeatedly, whether you feel ready or not. Inside your brain are systems designed for effort, focus, and learning. When you engage in something difficult, something that stretches your current ability, you activate neurochemical systems that mark that experience as important. Chemicals like dopamine are not just about pleasure. They are about motivation and reinforcement. When you push through resistance, when you do something that requires effort, your brain starts tagging that behavior as meaningful. Over time, it becomes easier to access. This is why the hidden power of your brain is not in talent. It's in training. It's in your ability to deliberately place yourself in situations that challenge you and to stay there long enough for your brain to adapt. Most people quit too early. They interpret discomfort as a signal to stop. But discomfort is often the exact signal that your brain is beginning to change. Think about focus for a moment. Your ability to concentrate is not just a personality trait. It's a skill that can be trained. When you sit down to work and your mind drifts and you bring it back, that act of returning your attention is the training. That is the repetition that strengthens neural circuits for focus. Every time you resist distraction, you are building a brain that is better at staying engaged. The same is true for emotional control. When you feel stress or anxiety, your brain is activating specific pathways that have likely been reinforced over time. But if you learn to regulate your breathing, to slow down your physiological response, you can begin to shift those patterns. Your brain starts associating stress with control instead of chaos. Over time, your baseline changes. There is also a powerful connection between your body and your brain. The way you move, the way you breathe, the amount of light you expose your eyes to in the morning. These are not small details. They directly influence your brain chemistry. For example, getting natural light early in the day helps regulate your circadian rhythm, which in turn affects your energy, focus, and mood. Exercise increases levels of neurochemicals that support learning and memory. These are tools, and most people ignore them. Another aspect of your brain's hidden power lies in something called neuroplasticity. This is the ability of your brain to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. But neuroplasticity is not always active at the same level. It tends to be heightened when you are alert, focused, and slightly challenged. That means if you want to learn faster, if you want to change a behavior, you need to be in the right state. Not relaxed to the point of passivity and not stressed to the point of overwhelm, but somewhere in between. This is where deliberate practice comes in. Repetition alone is not enough. You need repetition with attention. You need to be aware of what you are doing, what you are improving, and where you are making mistakes. That awareness drives the brain to update its circuits more efficiently. There is also something important to understand about failure. When you fail at something, your brain receives feedback. If you approach that failure with curiosity instead of frustration, you keep your brain in a learning mode. But if you associate failure with threat, your brain shifts into a defensive state and learning slows down. The interpretation matters just as much as the outcome. Your beliefs also play a role. Not because belief itself magically changes reality, but because belief influences behavior. If you believe you can improve, you are more likely to engage in the kinds of actions that lead to improvement. That engagement then drives the biological changes in your brain. So belief becomes a gateway to action, and action becomes the mechanism of change. There is a system in your brain that filters what you notice in the world. It prioritizes information based on what it thinks is important. If you constantly focus on limitations, problems, and reasons why something won't work, your brain becomes better at finding those things. But if you train yourself to look for opportunities, patterns, and solutions, your brain adapts in that direction. You are, in a very real sense, training your perception. Leap is another critical component. During sleep, your brain consolidates memories and reinforces learning. It replays patterns of neural activity from the day and strengthens the connections that matter. If you cut your sleep short, you are cutting off that process. You are limiting your brain's ability to solidify what you are trying to learn or change. There is also a timing component to how your brain functions. Your energy, focus, and alertness fluctuate throughout the day. Understanding your own rhythms allows you to align your most demanding tasks with your peak performance windows. This is not about working harder. It's about working in a way that matches how your brain naturally operates. One of the most overlooked aspects of brain function is the role of small, consistent actions. People often look for big breakthroughs, dramatic changes, or sudden transformations. But your brain changes through accumulation. Small actions repeated over time create large shifts. It's the consistency that drives the rewiring. And here's where the real shift happens. When you stop seeing your brain as something that limits you and start seeing it as something you can train, everything changes. You begin to take ownership of your attention, your habits, your environment. You realize that you are not waiting for change. You are creating it moment by moment through your actions. There is a cost to this awareness. Because once you understand how your brain works, you can no longer pretend that your patterns are fixed. You can no longer say, this is just how I am, without recognizing that it is also how you have been repeatedly acting. That can be uncomfortable, but it is also empowering. The hidden power of your brain is not something you unlock once. It is something you engage with daily. It is in the way you start your morning, the way you handle distraction, the way you respond to difficulty, the way you recover from setbacks. These are all inputs into a system that is constantly updating itself. Your brain is always listening to what you do, not what you intend, not what you say you'll do, but what you actually do. And it adjusts accordingly. If you want a different brain, you need different inputs. Different levels of focus, different patterns of behavior, different responses to challenge. There's no single moment where everything changes. There is a process, a gradual, consistent reshaping of neural circuits that over time leads to a completely different way of thinking, feeling, and performing. And that process is available to you, regardless of where you start. Right now, as you sit here, your brain is active. Neurons are firing, connections are being reinforced or weakened. Even this moment is shaping your future ability to focus, to learn, to act. The question is not whether your brain is changing. It is. The question is whether you are directing that change or leaving it to chance. Because if you leave it to chance, your brain will simply adapt to whatever environment and behaviors you give it. It will become efficient at distraction if you constantly switch tasks. It will become efficient at avoidance if you repeatedly escape discomfort. It will become efficient at doubt if you rehearse uncertainty. But if you take control, if you deliberately choose where to place your attention, what to practice, how to respond, you begin to guide that process. You begin to shape a brain that supports the life you actually want. And that is the hidden power. Not something mystical, not something reserved for a few people, but a fundamental property of your biology. The ability to change through action, the ability to rewire through repetition, the ability to become something different by consistently doing something different. Every focused minute, every resisted distraction, every completed task when you didn't feel like it. These are not small wins. They are signals. They are instructions. They are the raw material your brain uses to build a better version of itself.